In May of 2017, 3 young women from Florida were arrested in the aftermath of a video-recorded broad daylight fight, of which several clips went viral on YouTube and Facebook. The Mass Brawl unfolded in Jacksonville at 3730 Moncrief Road and had been triggered by an earlier altercation involving 18-year-old Jontiana Pitts. Footage showed her striking a woman several times with a closed fist at 3000 Moncrief Road. The victim struggled to defend herself but didn't fight back. Pitts also struck a uniformed security guard, inflicting abrasions to his arms when he tried to break up the fight. Roughly 90 minutes later, a larger skirmish erupted at Simmons Johnson Park. Pitts, armed with a baseball bat allegedly supplied by her mother, was recorded striking 2 women in the head and body as they were lying defenseless on the ground. When one of the victims, a pregnant 26-year-old woman, took shelter in a parked Chevrolet Cobalt, Pitts and several other individuals tried to get to her. The 18-year-old was captured on video kicking the vehicle and smashing its windshield with the bat. The victim was eventually able to flee. Pitts was arrested within 24 hours and charged with aggravated battery, causing great bodily harm, battery on a security officer, both felonies, and a misdemeanor count of criminal mischief. Zachariah Marie Johnson and Ronetta Siobhan Wright, both in their early 20s, were also arrested on charges of fighting and criminal mischief in the incident's wake. They were recorded brawling with the 26-year-old woman and 2 female teenagers. Wright repeatedly punched one of the victims and kicked another in the head while she was on the ground. The outcome of Johnson and Wright's criminal cases was unclear, but Pitts pleaded guilty to 2 counts of felony aggravated battery with a deadly weapon and 1 count of misdemeanor criminal mischief the following year. She was sentenced to 1 year in the county jail, followed by 3 years of house arrest. Number 6. Rocky Lockridge. In the spring of 2013, a cell phone video captured somewhere in the US showed a red-shirted man, seemingly in a state of intoxication, harassing an elderly man on the street. The aggressor threatened the other man and started making his way towards him. Others were heard warning the belligerent challenger, "Don't go down there, man," while pleading with his would-be victim, "Don't do it, champ." The man who was being harassed was Rocky Lockridge, a 2-time super featherweight world champion boxer. In the 1980s, he'd captured the WBA belt and lineal super featherweight title with a first-round knockout of previously undefeated Roger Mayweather, uncle of boxing great Floyd Mayweather. Lockridge also earned the IBF title and ended his career with 44 wins, 36 via knockout. By the time that he was harassed in the street, Lockridge had suffered through years of drug addiction, homelessness, panhandling, and a stroke that left him needing a cane to get around. In spite of the adversity he'd faced, Lockridge's fighting reflexes had remained sharp. When his aggressor got in his face, he sprang into a fighting stance and knocked him out cold with a blistering 2-punch combo. The bully remained motionless on the pavement until the video cut off. Given Lockridge's past, the clip of the knockout earned a great deal of attention online. It wasn't, however, the first instance of the boxing champion achieving internet fame. In 2010, his family brought him to the A&E TV series Intervention. A clip from an episode showed Lockridge being told by a male relative that he still loved him. The emotional declaration triggered a loud wail from Lockridge, which became a meme titled "Best Cry Ever." The YouTube clip of the cry earned nearly 100 million views. Lockridge spent 90 days in a rehab facility and maintained his sobriety ever since, including upon facing the street harasser in 2013. His health steadily declined in the years that followed, and he passed away in 2019 at the age of 60. Number 5. 2013 Ukraine Hooligan Incident. In the fall of 2013, a mass brawl involving dozens of soccer hooligans erupted on a street somewhere in the Ukraine. Cell phone footage of the unfolding chaos was picked up by multiple media outlets. As reported by the Daily Mail, the warring parties consisted of ultras from Metalist Kharkiv and Spartak Moscow, who'd teamed up against supporters of Dynamo Kiev. The latter group was cornered by their shirtless rivals outside of a shop. As cars drove through what appeared to be a busy intersection, punches, kicks, and makeshift projectiles flew in every direction during the fight, which lasted roughly 2 minutes. Men were recorded dropping to the pavement, and one individual was seen being viciously stomped by rival combatants, who jumped on his head with both feet. Local police arrived at the scene accompanied by specialized units, and most of the hooligans scattered. The few that remained behind were lined up by law enforcement to be interviewed. Tensions between Spartak Moscow and Dynamo Kiev fans could be traced back to when the teams were both battling for the top position in the Soviet top league. Following the fall of the Soviet Union, the rivalry and consequent violence was also reflective of political tensions between Russia and Ukraine. Number 4. Chinia Barnes and Tiffany Washington. An argument over a Snapchat video between teenagers Chinia Barnes and Tiffany Washington, both from Houston, Texas, devolved into a physical altercation on a Sunday in late July of 2018. The fight was captured on cell phone video, which showed the two teens wrestling on the grass outside of an apartment complex in the city's southeast. As seen in the footage, a woman was watching them fight with a pistol in hand. She then pointed the weapon at others, threatening them not to get involved before she moved in to separate the teens. The gun-toting woman was subsequently identified as Chade Lockett, Barnes' mother. Two versions of the events surrounding the altercation emerged. Lockett claimed that she and her daughter were outnumbered by over a dozen people who'd come to support Washington. Lockett maintained that the pistol wasn't a real weapon but her son's BB gun, a realistic replica on the likeness of which she'd reportedly relied to defend herself and her daughter from the aggressive group. Lockett told the media in the aftermath, "I'm doing what a mother should do, which is protect your child, and y'all trying to make it seem like y'all didn't do anything." The mother added that she was motivated in her decision to brandish the pistol by seeing someone from the rival group carrying a knife. People on Washington's side of the argument claim that Lockett pulled the weapon as soon as the fight broke out and that they were frightened for their lives. Washington's grandmother reported that the teen had been repeatedly pistol-whipped by Lockett, but the latter denied the allegation. Law enforcement began investigating the incident, but no arrests were reported in the immediate aftermath. Number 3. 2019 Croydon Incident. On September the 3rd of 2019, law enforcement descended on London Road in Croydon, England, after up to 20 men started fighting each other, armed with knives, poles, and metal baseball bats. Bystanders recorded the melee, and one particularly harrowing clip showed two men dueling with metal bats, resulting in audible clanks as they tried to deliver hard blows on each other. More combatants joined in the fray and were seen throwing objects across the street and swinging their weapons. A cacophony of shouting echoed on London Road as a bystander recording the melee pondered, "What the F is happening in Croydon, man?" As reported by a Metropolitan Police spokesperson, law enforcement began investigating the incident. No injuries were reported in the incident's wake, and a knife was recovered from the scene. Today's topic was requested by Tamika Davis 6641. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know. in the comment section below. Number 2. Joel Gretch. 24-year-old Australian bodybuilder Joel Gretch was reportedly spotted tampering with a car in a neighbourhood of Craigieburn, north of Melbourne, in February of 2023. One of the residents who'd witnessed him in the area would later report that Gretch appeared to be discombobulated, stating he was dazed. It was like he didn't know where he was. As the bodybuilder was trying to smash the vehicle's window, he was confronted by its 72-year-old owner. Moments later, Gretch allegedly knocked the man out cold. Witnessing the incident, the victim's 33-year-old son came at him with a bat and struck him. The hit had no effect on the muscle-bound perpetrator, who was reported to have barely flinched. Gretch also assaulted the second man before fleeing. Law enforcement tracked him down to a footpath and moved in to make the arrest, but the bodybuilder was reported to have engaged in aggressive resistance. He was taken down, and witnesses would later note that the officers were kneeling on his back for some time. Gretch became unresponsive during the arrest. Paramedics struggled to revive the bodybuilder, with their efforts captured on dashcam video, but he ultimately passed away at the scene. There were multiple theories surrounding the incident, but a definitive answer eluded the authorities pending the results of an autopsy and a further investigation into Gretch's movements on the day. His death was believed to have been linked to one or a combination of several lead-up events. The father-son duo were arrested and interviewed by the homicide squad for their possible role. The police officers were suspected of heavy-handed tactics while taking Gretch into custody, and there were also reports that earlier in the day, the bodybuilder had been involved in another broad daylight fight with individuals familiar to him. It remained unclear which of the 3 altercations, if any, had factored into his demise, which, as of the latest information available on the matter, was still a mystery. Stick around after number 1 to also watch our previous release about when mental health institutions go wrong. Number 1. Incident in Birmingham. A broad daylight fight that broke out in Birmingham, England on September the 2nd of 2017 was captured on bystander cell phone video, and the clip widely circulated online in the aftermath. An Audi driver dressed in all black was set upon by 2 men during what was described as a road rage incident. The Audi driver adopted a martial arts stance and then sweep-kicked one of his attackers, dropping him to the ground. The battered man rose to his feet and was game to fight, but the martial artist then floored him with several more kicks and punches. After seeing his companion getting pummeled, the other man seemed less inclined to engage the martial artist, but he nevertheless moved towards him and ended up on the receiving end of a hard kick. His companion then returned and took a swing at the martial artist, who deftly dodged the blow and then retaliated with a devastating strike of his own that knocked his aggressor out cold. The strike ended the altercation and the Audi driver returned to his car. Paramedics from the West Midlands Ambulance Service were called to the scene, but only minor injuries were reported. No arrests were made in the immediate aftermath. The fight was viewed over 250,000 times on social media, with one commenter arguing that the beaten-down duo should have known better, writing, "When a guy starts standing like Bruce Lee, walk away, see another day." Number 6. Philip Similan. One morning in 2013, Christina Edkins travelled to school by way of a rush hour bus in the West Midlands region of England. After boarding the public transit vehicle in the city of Birmingham, as she did almost every day, the young woman suddenly became the target of a random knife attack. It was perpetrated by another one of the bus's passengers, who was later identified as 23-year-old Walsall resident Philip Similan. Over the course of the unprompted assault, Edkins was fatally stabbed and her attacker was consequently arrested by local police. Similan, who'd previously been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, later pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, and he was thus detained indefinitely under the Mental Health Act of 1983. In the wake of the deadly incident, officials at the Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health NHS Foundation Trust launched an investigation. It was subsequently determined that Edkins' death could have been prevented if Similan had been given proper mental health treatment. The young man had previously been incarcerated for the assault and battery of his mother. The NHS's probe found that when he was released from custody, it should have been evident that his mental state would only continue to deteriorate and that he was likely to reoffend. Similan murdered Edkins within 3 months of his release from jail. Number 5. Alexander Lewis Ranwell. Englishman Alexander Lewis Ranwell was arrested on February 8th of 2019 for trespassing on a farm in Ilfracombe. He was released the following morning but was then taken back into custody later in the day for attacking an elderly farmer. During his second arrest, Lewis Ranwell allegedly tried to grab one of the officer's tasers and exhibited what was described as aggressive and bizarre behavior. Upon posting bail on February the 10th, Lewis Ranwell traveled to Exeter, where he broke into the home of 80-year-old Anthony Payne and bludgeoned him to death. Shortly thereafter, he walked to another nearby house and murdered a pair of twins identified as Dick and Roger Carter, aged 84. It would later emerge that Lewis Ranwell had committed the triple homicide while he was suffering from paranoid delusions, under the influence of which he'd become convinced that his victims were actually criminals guilty of vile offenses. At about 5 a.m. the following morning, Lewis Ranwell went to the Rougemont Hotel and demanded breakfast from the night manager. When he was told that his meal wouldn't be ready for another hour, the 28-year-old threw a glass bowl at the employee and threatened to kill him. The manager then fled into the basement, but Lewis Ranwell gave chase, armed with a knife he'd stolen from the hotel's kitchen. The police arrived a short time later and took him into custody, finally putting an end to his rampage. In the aftermath, it was determined that Lewis Ranwell should have been detained in a mental health hospital upon his initial arrest, given that he'd been exhibiting clear signs of a deteriorating mental state and paranoid behavior. After standing trial for his crimes, Lewis Ranwell was found not guilty by reason of insanity and was issued an indefinite hospital order. In March of 2022, it was reported that Lewis Ranwell was actually suing the National Health Service and local police departments for their alleged shortcomings in his mental health care while he was in custody. The lawsuit claimed that the murders of Payne and the Carter twins were a direct result of the authorities' failure to conduct a proper mental health assessment of the man, which would have ensured that he was never released in the first place. Number 4. Anthony Garver and Mark Alexander Adams. Two mental patients with documented histories of violent crimes escaped from a lower security unit of Western State Hospital in Lakewood, Washington, on April the 6th of 2016. Officials reported that 28-year-old Anthony Garver and Mark Alexander Adams, aged 58, had gotten out of the facility through a broken window. Adams, who'd been admitted to the hospital after being accused of domestic assault in 2014, was found roughly 15 miles from downtown Seattle the following day and apprehended by the authorities. Garver remained on the run for a few days after their initial escape. He first fled to Seattle, where he bought a bus ticket to Spokane under the alias John Anderson. Upon his arrival in Spokane, Garver reportedly contacted his parents and asked them for his passport, which he'd reportedly intended to use to fly to Morocco. Instead of complying with their fugitive son's requests, the man's parents notified the police that he'd been in contact with them. Officers eventually tracked Garver down to a wooded, mountainous area of Spokane Valley, where he'd hidden himself under a pile of debris. After being taken back into custody, Garver, whose criminal trial had previously been delayed due to mental health concerns, faced a legal proceeding stemming from the 2013 killing of Philippa Evans Lopez. The 20-year-old woman had been found tied to her bed with over 24 stab wounds and a slashed throat. In October of 2019, Garver was convicted of first-degree murder in connection to Evans Lopez's death. He was consequently sentenced to 32 years in prison plus several years of community custody following his release. In the early morning hours of July the 7th of 2016, security cameras at a supported living apartment building in the English city of Bristol captured resident Jeffrey Barry emerging from his neighbor's flat covered in blood. The 57-year-old subsequently called the emergency service to report that he'd murdered Kamil Ahmad, a man whom he'd threatened to harm on several occasions in recent years. Barry reportedly told the phone operator, "I warned the staff. I warned the crisis team. He's dead now." Investigators gathered that the staff to which he was referring was the group of mental health professionals assigned to his care at the Signet Hospital, Qstoke. He'd been released from the facility only hours before his chilling phone call confession. Barry had previously been admitted to Corlington Road Hospital upon being taken into custody in connection to his escalating pattern of hostile behavior, some of which was described as racially motivated towards Ahmad. Efforts to create space for new admissions at Corlington Road led to Barry being later transferred to Signet Hospital, Cewstoke. In a 2018 report published by the Bristol Safeguarding Adults Board, it was suggested that officials at Signet Hospital hadn't been made properly aware of Barry's behavioral concerns when he was initially admitted to the facility. The area manager who should have been in charge of the patient's care was reportedly on holiday at the time of the transfer, which allegedly caused a crucial failure of information sharing between the psychiatric hospitals. As a consequence of the miscommunication between the facilities, a mental health tribunal that subsequently reviewed Barry's detention made the misguided decision to order his discharge. Hours after his release on the evening of July the 6th of 2016, Barry broke into Ahmad's apartment and murdered him, carrying out the attack he'd been threatening for years. Following a trial at Bristol Crown Court in November of 2017, Barry was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 23 years. Number 1. Leslie Gadsby. After being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia in 2003, Leslie Gadsby was on the verge of being placed in a mental health center. The hospital, however, was reportedly unable to find an open bed for him for 2 days after his initial admission. When there was finally a space available for him, a care professional called his family's home in Liverpool, England, to notify them that the facility was ready for his arrival. Unfortunately, it wasn't Gadsby's relatives who answered the phone, but a police officer who told the mental health official that the 31-year-old had brutally beaten his father to death with a hammer while awaiting his hospital admittance. Gadsby was consequently sent to a psychiatric unit until he was eventually granted a conditional discharge 2 years later. As per the conditions of his release, Gadsby was supposed to be monitored 24 hours a day. The contact he had with his mother was meant to be heavily restricted and supervised by mental health professionals. In March of 2010, Gadsby was moved to the Scott Clinic Mental Health Center in Stonycroft, where he would be afforded more freedom and independence than his previous facility. Just a few days after his transfer, the then 42-year-old Gadsby was visited by his mother. The two were left alone in an upstairs apartment where Gadsby fatally stabbed a 70-year-old woman before walking down to the first floor to converse with a group of social workers about a game of Scrabble, as if nothing had happened. Gadsby ultimately pled guilty to manslaughter and was ordered to spend the remainder of his life at a secure psychiatric hospital. An official investigation into the matter determined that had Gadsby been subject to robust supervision, as his conditional release had stipulated, the risk of him violently acting out would have been substantially reduced. Thanks for watching. Would you rather fight 100 rat-sized men or a single man-sized rat? Let us know in the comments section below.